Hi, this is Seth Harper.
And I'm Hannah Kallio.
And this is the Living Uncharted podcast.
Back again, baby.
Yes, indeed.
Welcome to episode 4, people.
Man, here we are at it again. So, honestly, I'm really happy with how it's been going so far. Seems like people really like it. I know that we've had a ton of fun recording it.
I guess, yeah.
Okay.
It's fine.
Whatever.
It's fine.
So yeah, thanks for joining us on this latest episode. As we promised you at the end of the last episode, we have our first guest on today. But before we get to that, we just have one housekeeping item to attend to. I'd just like to remind all of our listeners that if you want to have the most direct way to keep up with what is happening with the podcast, I would urge you all to go ahead and follow our Instagram page. Asher's doing a great job of running that and making some pretty epic posts
Seth.
on there about everything that we're doing. So yeah, if you want the most direct way, the best way to keep up with what we're doing, make sure to go to Instagram and follow that. If you just type in Living Uncharted, you should be able to find it pretty easily. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Asher, and he is going to start by telling us a brag sheet about our special guest that we have today.
Yeah, so we wanted when we started this podcast, we kind of came up with this idea of doing a brag sheet for any guests we had on, just to kind of give a little bit of like their credentials, honestly, for being on the podcast. We have a lot of people we want to have on, but also not everyone is interesting enough to be on this podcast. So our guest today has birthed 5 children. So that's kind of wild.
Well, that's incredible right there.
Yeah. She has, if you hadn't figured out by the first thing, our guest is a woman.
Yeah, we have not. We've done a lot of epic things on this show. We have not figured out a way for men to give birth.
No.
So if you were looking for that I apologize.
Honestly, we get enough subscribers, anything could happen. Moving right along, 3 of those births were home births, and our guest survived all 3 of them. So, go home births.
Well done.
She practically taught herself Italian as a foreign exchange student in Italy. We'll hear a little bit about that. She is a certified permaculture designer and a certified life coach. So
I'm going to be honest, I don't know what the word permaculture means, but it sounds epic.
And Seth, no one does. No one does. So that's
okay. That's good.
I
feel a little bit better about myself then.
At one point, she was a part of a pyramid scheme selling essential oils. If you want to,
oh my gosh, I am so being called out right now.
If you want to get in on the pyramid scheme, you can become part of it yourself at doterra.com.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah.
Not a sponsor. Not a sponsor.
Yet. Her favorite movie is The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which we'll probably hear a little bit about. It's a crazy movie. She also did a stint as an archaeologist, which will be the bulk of our episode today.
Can't wait to hear about that. That's going to be epic to hear about.
Yeah. she also has a degree in European Studies with an art minor.
Woo!
And that's the brag sheet.
Sweet. Well, I'm sure that you guys heard her a little bit in the background as she was commenting on some of the brag sheets. So without further ado, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce our first guest on the show, Hannah Kallio.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor for me to be here. Really.
Yes.
It really is. I mean it. I'm super excited about this.
Yeah. Good.
We're really glad to have you. And before anyone says anything in the comments, yes, she does happen to have the same last name as my co-host, and that is not a coincidence. She is the co-host's mother.
Yeah. One of those 5 children she birthed was me. So.
Yeah. Which, honestly, I think that that's the most impressive thing that Asher failed to mention in that brag sheet, is that not only did she give birth to 5 children and survive 3 home births, but she had to raise Asher and deal with him for all that time. So.
Sheesh.
So giving birth is a whole adventure in and of itself, and I love giving birth, but honestly, parenting Asher has been an adventure, and I would love to talk about that more sometime, but yeah, Asher's taught me a lot about adventure, and so I'm really excited about what you guys are doing with this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you should be. As you should.
That's right. No, I was talking to my mom the other day, and she was like, I'm not really a big podcast person. Like, I've just never been into them. And I'm like, Mom, as my mother, I don't care if you like it or not. You are obligated to listen. So suck it up.
You are a podcast mom now.
That's right.
So act accordingly.
She didn't choose the podcast life. The podcast life chose her.
That's right. Absolutely. So yeah, the brag sheet gave a good baseline of things to know about Hannah. But before we get into the bulk of the podcast, Hannah, is there anything else that you'd like the listening audience to know about you?
Well, I mean, I've had a really interesting life, honestly. Like, I've gotten to try out a lot of different things. So there's a lot that I could say, but I actually want to share a little anecdote about our 2 hosts here.
Yes.
So when Asher and Seth first met, this was in like a youth group context, and what a lot of people don't know is that it wasn't just that they didn't necessarily hit it off right away, but actually someone had warned Asher about Seth. We had a mutual acquaintance that actually said, "You stay away from that Seth Arthur kid. He's an a-hole." And
oh my gosh.
And I was like, whoa, okay. And I just want to go on record as saying I'm really glad that you didn't let that scare you away, because we love Seth and he's...
I didn't let it scare me away permanently.
Okay. Well, I'm thankful that you overcame that obstacle to your friendship, along with all the other, hair-related obstacles.
Oh, man. So, I did not hear about this particular story until a couple days ago. And so, it caught me off guard a little bit. To be fair, well, I don't know how old I would have been at that point, but
probably like
I don't know,
15. And I was going to say...
A little younger than that, actually. Probably like 13 or 14.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
But at that point in my life, I don't know. I was probably pretty cocky. Probably did some things that... Said some things that, were rude or... you know how teenagers are. They do what they want.
I was going to say, when you first said we met each other in a youth group context, no one's really putting on their best. That's not the ideal place to meet anyone. It's just unfortunate. So, to all the listeners out there, if you met someone in like a middle school youth group and you didn't hit it off,
Like, maybe give them a second
maybe
chance.
give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
A lot can change.
Oh my gosh. I would not want to meet middle school me, honestly.
I feel like there's
I think I might want to, but maybe just like slap myself in the
Just
face a little bit. Like,
give him some
kid,
advice.
jeez, kid.
That's right. I feel like there's very few people on Earth who would say, you know what? I was amazing in middle school. You
I
know?
peaked in middle school.
Ooh.
Which, if you're saying that, that's probably an indictment of what you're doing now.
Sad days.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Let's get into it here. Our main question for you today is about the dig you did in Israel. We kind of mentioned it in the brag sheet, but yeah, just kind of go into that time in your life, and we'll comment along the way.
Yeah. So to give you a little bit of context, I was born in Israel, and my dad still lives there, and his whole side of the family still lives there. So for listeners who are listening and wondering, like, what's she doing in Israel? That's how I originally got there. I was spending the summer in college, reconnecting with my dad, getting to know that whole part of the extended family for the first time. And one of the things that I was really passionate about, and still am really passionate about, is archaeology. So my dad happened to live really close to one of the largest archaeological digs in Israel. It's the largest in northern Israel. It's a site, it's called Tel Hatzor. It's a site that's mentioned multiple times. Like, Hatzor is mentioned multiple times in the Bible. And a lot of archaeological sites in Israel, at the beginning of the name is the word Tel. And Tel means hill. And the reason that they're called Tels is that it looks like a hill externally, but it's not actually a hill. It's actually like layers and layers of civilization piled up one on top of the other until you get this hill that eventually, gets covered with debris, and you could drive by it and just think it's geology. But then when people start digging, they discover all these remains of all these different civilizations. So
Wait,
that's...
Hannah, can I cut in for a second?
Yeah.
So is that how Tel Aviv got
Exactly.
its name?
Yeah.
That's
Tel
right.
Aviv
Tel Aviv.
is also that in that name also means hill.
And how wild is it that, like, you go to visit my grandpa and, like, so close is
Yeah.
something that you're so passionate about?
Yeah. And actually, I mean, in Israel, really, like, there's so much archaeology everywhere. Like, it's kind of the joke, like, you can't pour a parking lot in Israel without doing an archaeological dig first. You can't lay a plumbing pipe in Israel without doing an archaeological dig. Like, there is so much rich history.
Another one of
so
Solomon's
many.
mansions found in parking spot excavation.
No, but seriously, we'll talk about this later on, but Asher and I actually got to participate in a really brief archaeological experience that was because of a parking lot. So we'll get to that. Yeah. But one example of, like, how these tells work, when my mom had been in Israel like 20 years prior, she lived in this town. There was a Roman amphitheater in this town, and then there was a tell. And, so it just looks like a big hill. It's covered with grass and rocks and debris and everything. And so when I went back to Israel 20 years later, she's like, oh, be sure to go see the Roman amphitheater. Because when she had lived there, that was the only thing that had been excavated. Turns out the tell was actually 23 layers of civilization.
Oh my goodness.
And there's, like, a massive city underneath this tell, and they've excavated it all now, and it's just massive.
So the amphitheater is like a small drop in the pond.
Yeah, the amphitheater now is like maybe less than 5% of all that there is. Yeah.
So sorry, I hope you don't mind if I interrupt again.
No, absolutely.
When they're excavating these tells, is it all still mostly above ground, or is there any part of the civilizations that have started to go underground?
So it depends on what stage you are in the excavation, because prior to excavation, Tel Hatzor also looked like a hill. There in some cases wouldn't be anything visible above ground, or there might be, random scattered stones, or seemingly random scattered stones. Sometimes there'll be part of an artifact poking out or close to the surface, and that's what originally tips people off, or did in the past. Today we have really sophisticated equipment that they can use to do basically to visualize what's underground before they even dig. But at that time, people just literally would dig and see what they found, like when these digs originally started. Some of them have been going on for decades. Tel Hatzor, I think they originally started doing like exploratory digging at the beginning of the 19th century, or at the beginning of the 1900s. So this is like a long process in some cases.
That's amazing. So like, what kind of a role did you have in excavating part?
Yeah, so I was just there as a volunteer, and this was a very brief experience for me. So I was, basically doing grunt work. And the thing that I want to say about archaeology, and I think that this actually holds true for so many things in life that we think of as, like, that we associate with adventure. Because I think a lot of us, when we think of archaeology, we think of Indiana Jones. And, so we imagine it as being this adventurous, fast-paced thing. And
actually, the Germans are chasing you.
The people are chasing you with weird accents, and you have a whip, and, and the reality...
Jumping out of planes.
The reality of archaeology is that most of the time, it's extremely drudgerous.
Yeah.
So to give you an idea of what the daily schedule was like, I had to get up at 4 to catch a bus at 4:30 to get to the dig site, because this is summer and it's in Israel, and so the heat is not our friend. So we had to start the dig at 5 every morning. So 5 a.m., you grab a cup of coffee and maybe like a brioche with some Nutella, and that's like your
the breakfast of champions.
But that's like your pre-breakfast. Just hang on. That's your pre-breakfast.
There's a second breakfast?
Well, just hang on.
Comes in pints?
So then you get your assignment for the day of where you're going to be digging. And the digging at this time, basically, it goes like this. So everybody has like small shovels. Like a small spade kind of thing.
Like a little Tykes kind of
situation. bigger than that. Bigger
like
than
plastic.
That. Definitely bigger than that. Anyway, so everybody has like a small shovel, and then you have a trowel. Okay? And then you also have like a large, like a pretty aggressive bristle brush.
Yeah.
And then you have like some smaller brushes, and then you have like toothbrushes. So it'll basically go like this. You get down into your digging, into that part of the excavation area where you're working, and there'd be a team of maybe 8 to 10 people in an area, and the foreman comes, or the person who's leading the dig comes, and it's like, okay, you guys dig with your shovels. So you're like digging, and you get to a certain point, like you've cleared away a certain amount of material, and it's like very clay sand, it doesn't look like our soil at all. It's like very light and very crumbly, but you're digging away, and after you've cleared away a certain amount of material, and then you're removing that with buckets, and that's being carried away with wheelbarrows, and then he sees that you've cleared away a certain amount, and then it's like, okay, well, we could be getting close to something, so you better switch to your trowels. So then we're like more carefully, more gingerly removing material with our trowels, because we don't want to damage anything that we might find.
And do you see anything at this point, or you
most of the time you don't.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I want to say is that we removed and threw away wheelbarrows full of ceramic material every day. Like,
wow.
at some archaeological sites, even a small fragment of a ceramic vase or dish could be like very precious
Yeah.
and would instantly go in a museum, and books would be written on it or whatever. But because Tel Hatsor was such a huge dig, and we had so much material from some of the different eras that we were excavating, because at the same time you might be excavating like from different eras.
Yeah.
Like in one part of the site you're working with one area where you don't have a lot of findings, and another part you might be digging in another area where there's just a ton of material. Anyway, so
when you're going into a dig, does the foreman kind of have a general idea of, one, what you're looking for, and
Yes.
two, at like what levels of dirt you might find something?
Yes. They definitely do like test digs where they'll collect like basically like boring in several layers down, and then they'll bring up samples, and so they'll kind of have an idea, okay, if we get to this level, we have a pretty rough idea that we're mostly dealing with this historical era. Of course, it's not as neat and tidy as that, because when one civilization conquers another, they don't necessarily
Raise
everything neatly and start from scratch. Sometimes things get reused even for centuries at a time, and so usually parts would be destroyed and replaced with new construction, and parts wouldn't, and so the levels wouldn't be nice and neat and tidy, and it would take quite a bit of detective work to figure out where we were sometimes in the historical kind of like layer cake that we're moving through.
It kind of makes me think of the scene in the Lego movie where the foreman is like telling the construction crew that the main character is part of, all right, here's what the blueprint says. Take everything weird and blow it up.
Yeah, so
Your foreman's like, take everything that's pottery and throw it away.
yeah, and it was pretty maddening.
That's terrible.
It was rough actually, but for that era, that wasn't a mystery that we were trying to solve. We were looking for coins, we were looking for other metal implements, we were looking for different types of objects that would give us other clues about that society. So we're at trowels, right? So we're kind of gingerly scraping with trowels, and we get to a certain point. He's like, okay, we might be getting close. It's time to switch to bristle brushes. So then, we're just brushing even less material away with our brushes. And then finally he comes and he's like, okay, I want you to switch to toothbrushes. And we're all like, oh my gosh, we're like about to make the discovery of the century, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're like brushing away with our little toothbrushes, and then, he comes back a little later and is like, okay, yeah, you can switch back to shovels. We're like, what?
No!
Oh, that must have been such a disappointment at
And
that
so
point.
that's what archaeology is, you guys. Like, we're out in the sun. Some parts of the dig have like a shade cloth because the sun is so intense and so punishing. But it's just a massive site, so they can't cover the whole thing. So we would, like I said, we started at 5 a.m, and then we would take a break for breakfast at 9 a.m. And at that point, we would have Israeli breakfast. Israeli breakfast is a whole thing. So then there's still, like coffee and toast and all those kinds of things, but it's more like hard-boiled eggs, hummus and pita.
This is what we
lots
actually
of-
wanted to hear
Yeah,
about.
like Israeli salad every time, cottage cheese, because that's like a whole thing there, and they eat it for breakfast, which I'm Israeli, but I don't understand the cottage cheese
Yeah,
thing.
that seems a little strange to me. Cottage cheese, just as a concept, is something that I haven't come to terms with yet.
I am with you on that, and it is a whole thing. Anyway, so like Israeli breakfast at 9 a.m. and then everybody gets back to work, but the dig, like we have to quit at 1 o'clock. Like at 1 p.m. we have to be done, because that time the sun is high and it is so hot that it's like unsafe to work no matter how many water breaks you're taking. Like you just have to stop. And so like that's the whole work day. And then sometimes in the evening they would do like lectures for us on like things that had been found, or other interesting things about the dig. But that was pretty much the day at the dig, and I never found anything amazing. I mean, apart from like the ceramic pieces that I found were amazing to me, but
Did
they
you
weren't
get to keep any of them?
No, but they
You just
weren't
had
like
to throw them away.
Yeah, but they weren't like archaeologically significant.
Sure.
So some other people on our dig found some cool stuff, but like I personally, can't claim to have found anything amazing. But what, like, to me, the point of participating in the dig, like looking back on it now, I'm really glad that I had that experience, because I think that even though it was very drudgerous and not, exciting in the way that I hoped, it gave me such an appreciation for the people that do the work behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And I think so many times, there's like the exciting thing that everybody sees and applauds.
The newspaper bit.
Yeah, and then there are like the people that are actually doing the work behind the scenes, and there's something really valuable in like learning what goes into something that you appreciate. Yeah. Like I'm someone who loves to go to museums and be able to learn from artifacts from the past. And so like I just have a much deeper appreciation now for what it took to get that into that museum. And so I think...
And the dedication of people like day in, day out.
Yeah.
In the sun.
Yeah.
Beating down on them.
Sweating, getting dust in their eyes, literally eating dust, so that we can know more about our history. And so that we can preserve and safeguard valuable things.
Yeah, absolutely. So how long would a usual dig last? Like how many days, weeks, months, etc.?
So, like the Tel Hatzor dig has been going on for decades and is still ongoing. Like teams go back there every year and dig more.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So they'll have like a team might come for 6 weeks, or a team might come for 3 months in the summer, like if it's students, or they might come for a semester, depending on, if they're archaeological students. So some people will dig there for days, some for months, and some for years.
Yeah.
The archaeologist that's currently in charge of the dig is the one that was there when I was there, like 25 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
So
he's like dedicated his life to this.
He's been at this for a long haul. And he's probably supervising other digs as well, but this is like his main thing.
Do you know anything about... I didn't really think about this before, but like, do you know anything about the funding process? Like, you were a volunteer.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's, like, you have to pay other people.
So they do rely heavily on volunteers for some parts of the dig, especially, and then also students are key as well.
Yeah.
Because they're basically paying to participate. Because funding an archaeological dig, if you have to pay all of your workers an actual living wage, is like, it's almost impossible, because the amount of work is just so massive.
Right.
So it's almost impossible if you can't somehow leverage volunteers or students. But yeah,
and
there are people that do get paid to participate in digs if they have like expertise with a certain thing. They'll get called in to help explain findings that don't make sense, or help determine like, okay, we only have this budget, where should we dig to get the best bang for our buck? And they'll help do those assessments. Yeah.
And I feel like, since in most cases with archaeology, you don't really make a profit off of anything that you're finding. So
no, this is not an industry for people that want to get rich. And it's also like not an industry for people that want to be famous, really. Like, in Israel, there are some archaeologists that have made really important discoveries and have like a certain level of notoriety, but like it's mostly a pretty thankless job. And it's mostly just like the satisfaction of like, I'm connecting to my heritage, I'm connecting to these people that, left this amazing, beautiful legacy, and I want to know more about them. So that's the main satisfaction.
I think it's cool to think about too, like the fact that we can even find multiple levels of civilization somewhat is a testament to like how sophisticated their infrastructure was.
Oh,
like, we think about now, like, oh, we can build skyscrapers and like we're the most technologically advanced humanity has ever been. But these people were, as far as we know, building crazy things that lasted hundreds and
sometimes
thousands of years
Yeah.
with very rudimentary tools.
But that's one of the things that I love about archaeology too. I love how it puts things in perspective for me, like in a very like it's humbling in a good way. Like the Sumerians had a sewer system in 4000 BC. Like they were not primitive people,
right.
You know, like we have this idea of people from the past being more primitive or being less advanced or less sophisticated, and they were so sophisticated and so wise and so innovative, and they found ways to solve problems that are really, I don't know, it's very inspiring to me to think like we can really do more than we think we can with less than we think we need. And I love seeing examples of that in archaeology, and it's like humbling, but in an empowering way, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah, for sure.
Wow, like seriously, you know, clay and stone, and you found a way to make it happen.
That's a good bit of wisdom right there. Appreciate you sharing that. I had one other question about the experience on the dig. So, one, like, how long were you there personally? And two, what kinds of relationships did you develop with the people that you're working with, and have you maintained any of them going forward after the dig?
Yeah. So unfortunately, I was only there for a very short time, and because I had like, you know, my dad had like work conflicts, and he was moving during that time, and there was like a lot of family things that he really wanted me to be at. So I was just at the dig for a very short time, and I wasn't able to keep in touch with any of the people that I met on the dig, but I was working with a team of also like college age kids. Most of them were from the States, and there was definitely like a sense of camaraderie, probably similarly to what you would experience, you know, working on a landscaping crew.
Yeah.
Because it was very much that kind of like, you know, like we're getting dirty and sweaty and dusty, and but we're like doing it together, and we're seeing progress, even if we didn't necessarily find something. You know, we were like kind of clearing out a space and getting a better sense of what that space was like and what it was intended to do.
You get that,
it was like rewarding in the sense of like, oh wow, you know, now I can see this form of the architecture emerging, and that's exciting.
You do work, and like the amount of work you put in is directly correlated to how much you clear out. Or how much.
Yeah, very much so.
How old were you? Did you say?
I was 20 at the time.
Okay.
Wow, that's really awesome to hear about. Because like as you've been talking, I've kind of, you can correct me if I'm wrong if you think this is incorrect, but I've kind of had this image in my head of, so I've heard some interviews from other people about what it's like to work on a movie set.
Yeah.
In the sense that like, especially if you're one of the main actors or actresses, you're there for a while, you put in long hours, you build a lot of camaraderie with the people that you work with. And then when you were also mentioning like the fact that, you know, there's on an archaeological dig, there's a lot of behind the scenes workers that do a lot of the work that don't get recognized. Like when you said that, I immediately thought of, you know, every single movie that I've ever watched. You know, I immediately want to skip through the credits, but you know, all those people put in work in a movie. So like, I don't know, you were there for a short time, but would you say, is there any truth to that assessment?
Oh yeah, I think that's a really great example. Like I worked a lot in theater, and I actually was part of a movie. Like I was in the cast of a movie once, but I've also worked a lot of like tech theater behind the scenes. And so like, I think that's actually very accurate. And also there was kind of a theatrical element. This is a little bit of an aside, but there was kind of a theatrical element to the work that we were doing at the dig, in the sense that they made a pretty, at least at the time, pretty unusual decision, because at this site, they found this temple from the Iron Age, on the site.
Oh, wow.
And it was pretty significant. It was a pretty significant find.
Iron Age is old.
Iron Age is very old, but they knew that there was a lot of important history under the temple. Like, what they were really interested in was the Bronze Age site that the temple was built on. And so they made the somewhat controversial and kind of unusual at the time decision to actually dismantle the temple and reassemble it nearby in another part of the site. And actually, we've been there, and you've seen this, Asher. You were very little at the time, but they reconstructed, all the stones oriented in the way that they originally were, and as faithful as they could be to what the original temple would have looked like. So it's like this I say it's theatrical in the sense that, it's no longer historically accurate, like perfectly historically accurate, because they moved it. But it is this, almost like this set piece that's designed to give people the ability to feel what it was like and see what it was like. And then that allowed them to safely access all the layers of civilization below that temple.
That's so cool. Definitely, and I've never taken the time to think about all the different things that could go into something like that. So
I can't, that's just such a... Can you imagine being in that position of you found something? Like, first of all, you found something. You found a temple.
Yeah.
And then someone's like, you know what, though? There could be something under it. You have to make the decision of, do you perfectly preserve what's already been found, or do you just bulldoze it, or, like, in their case, moving it? That's a lot of work, too.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
And for you have no idea what's under there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It could be...
I mean, at that time, they didn't really have a way to, do scans and stuff.
It could be something absolutely insane, or it could be yep, we found a pot that's made of clay, maybe.
Yeah. I think that is true in so many areas of life, though. Like, we are constantly needing to do triage.
Yeah.
And we're constantly needing to edit and decide, what is really the most important thing here? What are my priorities? And then sometimes that means sacrificing in other areas.
Kind of like an essentialist mindset.
Yeah.
Well, Hannah, thank you so much for talking about that. Is there anything else that happened to you during that summer in Israel that you think was really eventful, or that stood out to you?
Probably the most adventurous aspect of that summer for me was traveling around by myself. I spent a lot of time traveling by myself, and even though Israel was my birthplace, I hadn't grown up there, and I hadn't learned the language from childhood. It was like a language that I was studying, but it was very much, I was very much in that phase where you're decoding, and it feels like you have to think about every word, and you have to process every sound really carefully, and that is very slow, of course. So I got there, and there are all these people talking at me really fast, in some cases yelling. And
if you've ever been talking to an Israeli, they do not talk slow.
They do not mess. It's pretty. We're pretty intense. So it was this very intensive experience of being in some dangerous situations too, and not always knowing how to evaluate. Is it safe for me to go there by myself? Is it not safe for me to go there by myself? But I really just made the decision, I'm here, and I want to live this experience to the fullest. And so, I'm not going to do anything stupid or rash, but I'm going to make the effort and kind of see how far I can take things. And so I ended up exploring a lot of places, a lot of archaeological sites on my own, and a lot of cities on my own. And it was definitely scary a lot of times. But I'm really proud of that summer, actually. I'm proud of how much I was able to see and how much I was able to experience, and how quickly I adapted to the language and the culture. Like looking back, it's incredible how much I was able to pick up in a short amount of time. And I don't say that to be like, I'm tooting my own horn, but just to like encourage people for what's possible.
Yeah.
You know, if you're willing to look silly, if you're willing to strike out on your own, there's so much that's possible.
Like, how much are you willing to fall on your face before?
Yeah, and I did so many times that summer. I mean, I remember this time at a site, you know, it was really hot, and this guy sold me water, and it's like in a water bottle, and, you know, it totally looks legit. Find out later he was filling it from a hose. I totally got super sick from that water. You know, and that was like a rookie mistake on my part. But those things happen. And I'm so thankful that I went there that day and that I was brave and, you know, saw what I wanted to see. Even
Mine?
Even though I got super
No,
sick.
it's good.
Zitov. No, so yeah, that's just another thing that I think is important to think about when you're thinking about exploration and travel.
How would you say the reception was? Like, so you're there, you know some Hebrew, but you're maybe stumbling through it a little bit. How would you say the reception was from, like, native Israelis?
So in some countries, people are super, like you alluded to the fact that I taught myself Italian.
Yeah.
And the difference was in Italy, the Italians are like cheering for you to learn their language, and they're like
Really?
wanting to fill in the blanks. They're wanting to help you finish your sentence. They're like watching and trying to guess what your next word is going to be, and if you don't know it, they'll like offer you a suggestion. And even if your pronunciation is terrible, they're like, close enough, you're doing great, like you got this. So it's true that to this day, I've never had an Italian lesson in my life, even though I like have lived and studied and even worked in Italy. But I had so many Italians that were like on my team in learning the language, you know, just everyday people that really like stepped up to help me out. And, you know, like they took the time because they didn't know English either. So they would like take the time to thumb through the dictionary and be like, do you mean this? Do you mean that? Whereas in Israel, like the level of stress in the society is so much higher, and the level of frustration is so much higher pretty much across the board. And people just don't have time. You know, there are a lot of immigrants in Israel, like a lot of people who needed to come to Israel as refugees and were learning the language as a second language, you know, and it wasn't necessarily like their first choice. So people are definitely used to language learners, but they're not super like, oh, let me help you figure that out.
Yeah.
No, it's okay.
It's very sink or swim.
Yeah.
It's very sink or swim.
That's so interesting that you say that about... I would kind of guess that from Israel, but then it's so interesting that you experienced, like, grace in Italy.
Oh, yeah.
Because right next to Italy is France.
Okay. But we've lived in France, and you know that I have deep love and respect for the French people. A lot of people give the French a hard time about their language snobbery.
However,
I'm going to be honest. The main reason that I do is because of Ron Swanson.
But this is this is something I feel really passionate about. The French have a beautiful language,
yeah,
and they do not want it to be corrupted. They're preserving, like, from their perspective, it's not about you, like, it's not that they don't like you, it's not that they're mean-spirited. They are just trying to preserve the integrity of their language. And, you know, we don't have that perspective in our society, and that's fine. There are lots of different ways to approach language, but I actually, even though I've been like on the receiving end of that, and it is really harsh, and I've totally cried in France after someone, you know, didn't acknowledge me because my pronunciation wasn't perfect, but I still totally respect it.
Yeah,
that's true. That's a really good point, because I think of, in English, we have so many different slang terms that have been developed over the years, and even different like dialects, one between like the UK and the United States, but even within the United States. So yeah, that's definitely a different perspective on language that I hadn't really thought about before.
Yeah, it's just totally like none of it is wrong or right necessarily.
Yeah.
Like I've never really thought about that. Like if you are really, really harsh and like, no, that's wrong.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily wrong. It's a different way of going about it, and you will be perceived differently than if you help people out a little bit. Yeah.
And I actually think that is one of the gifts of living in another culture or traveling, because there's such a temptation to moralize things that are really cultural. Like without even realizing it, we have these things in our culture that it's like, well, this is the right way to do it. Yep. And it's like, actually, that's your culture. And it's okay. Like, it's okay that that's your culture, but just know that it's not necessarily a moral question. And somebody else can have a perfectly legitimate reason for seeing it really differently than you do. And that can be beautiful too. So I just think, like, being able to recognize the difference between, like, this is, like, these are my values, this has to do with my integrity, this has to do with my morals, and a question that's just like, oh, that's my culture. Like, I can relax about that. Like, I can still defend my culture and value my culture, but I don't have to be, like, crusading for how other people are wrong.
Yeah, you don't have to view your culture as by far and away the best one, or there's one right way to
even if it is,
or even you don't even have to view it as superior, because you can acknowledge that other culture came to be for a reason in that place at that time, and it serves a purpose just like your culture serves a purpose in your space, in your time.
And obviously any culture that's been around for a while is like it's a culture because it works in some way.
Yeah, I love learning about other cultures for that same reason of, like, that idea of feeling humbled in a good way. Like, it's just so beautiful to see how other people solve problems together.
Yeah, so I think if this episode has taught us anything, you have more to talk about. There's many more adventures. So suffice it to say, this is not the last you've heard from Hannah Kallio.
We will definitely have to have you on again.
Yeah.
That would be super fun.
But just kind of in closing, what does it mean for you to live an adventurous life? That's something that we want to start asking our guests, and it's like the whole point of this podcast. If we can, after a year, if we can have a bunch of people's perspective on what adventure is and what an adventurous life consists of, I think Seth and I will be better for it. Our guests will be better for it, just kind of like conceptualizing it, and all our listeners will have like pages and pages of wisdom. So however you want to answer that.
Yeah, I love the question. I'm gonna get a little bit meta on you, so bear with me for a minute, because I feel like I can land this plane.
Go for it.
Okay, so you are the adventure. Okay, like when you're young, especially, like I remember when I first started really traveling overseas when I was 18, like I had this idea of like all these experiences that were outside of me that I wanted to like get or conquer or check off my bucket list, like I had a bucket list before that was even a thing, and I was like, I need to check all these things off, otherwise I'm a failure or I'm not adventurous enough or whatever. And the more I've lived and the more I've learned, the more I'm realizing like I am the adventure. Those experiences, the value that they have is that they enrich me. I can stay home now and I can remember, or I can be curious about an experience that I had that I didn't fully understand, or I can, enjoy a moment that was really beautiful. But I guess the point that I'm really trying to make is like that if you are like addicted to an experience that you have to have that's outside of yourself, that, those can be like fun in the short term for sure. And I'm not saying not to have those, but like they don't satisfy long term, because there's always like you're craving the next hit, right?
Or a bigger hit.
Yeah, or a bigger hit. Whereas if you really think, you know what, I'm the adventure, and I have the opportunity to like curate all these experiences for myself and surround myself with people that enrich that adventure, and who I can enrich, hopefully. And I think that is just a much more, it's a kinder way to live, and it's a more, like, it's ultimately a more satisfying way to live. And it allows you to really be present in the adventurous experiences that you live, because you're not so focused on checking a box. You're focused on like, this is about like me becoming the person that I'm meant to be. And I'm going to walk away, like whatever happens in this experience, I'm going to walk away a deeper, richer, more well-rounded person. Like maybe I'm going to have more compassion for somebody. Maybe I'm going to have more compassion for myself. Maybe I'm going to be more humble. Maybe I'm going to be wiser, whatever that is. But that's, to me, that's what it's about.
That seems like that perspective takes so much pressure off of like having a perfect experience. Like last episode, Seth and I talked about how disappointing it was to climb this mountain and get so close to the top and then have to come down early.
Yeah.
But with your perspective, it's like you didn't even have to start climbing the mountain to have an adventure.
Yeah, I mean, you guys talked about like the fears that you had to overcome to do certain things on that trip, or the first impressions that you had to overcome to become friends.
Yeah.
For sure.
Like that is what gets you in. And then the other thing that I want to say, like, you still seek out the experiences, but not to be able to check off the box. Like you are putting yourself, like when I went on the dig, I was showing up for an experience that I wanted to have. I didn't end up making the find of the century, but I put myself in a situation to potentially be able to make the find of the century. And so I think a lot of adventure is showing up and saying like, I'm here for this. And knowing that a lot of times the results aren't going to be super sexy, but you become someone by the way you show up, even if the result isn't super sexy.
For sure.
I feel like I'm just saying a lot, but I'm like soaking it all in.
I know that's exactly how I feel, because, well, yeah, Hannah, thanks for that. I really appreciate hearing that, because I know, at least for me personally, I'm not going to speak on behalf of Asher.
You can. Go ahead.
I know that for me, a lot of times I get tempted to fall into the trap of wanting to experience things for the sake of experience.
Yeah.
And I'm probably not the only person that feels that way.
Oh, no. I still fall prey to that sometimes. Yeah,
and so I guess, what you said just really shed some good light on the fact that, it's good to have those experiences, but it can be so much more and longer lasting if you're focusing on not just experiencing it because you want to experience it, but rather, I guess, like, how can that affect me going forward? And
well, to close off this episode, as always, we've got our segment, and I think we've settled on a name.
Get ready, guys.
Drum roll.
Get ready for the Adventure Microdose.
That's right.
Do you want to go first, Seth?
Sure, absolutely. So, as most of you know, you definitely know this, if you've listened to the first episode of the podcast. I'm married. Got married a few months ago.
Woo!
And one of the things that... Now, first of all, I just want to say that I definitely don't have all the answers now that I'm married. In fact, I probably have more questions now than I did
That's a good sign.
3-4 months ago.
Yeah.
But one thing that I've heard from a lot of people, and I've started to experience this, is that before you get married to someone, if you're dating them, you're engaged to them, courting them, it's easier to go on dates. And I didn't realize that once you're married, it's still a good idea to go on dates with your spouse. Because this has happened with me and Rowan so far, is that a lot of times, like, we forget to intentionally spend quality time together because we're just always around each other. We're living together now. So yeah, last night we went on a pretty cool date. We went mini golfing at a local place in Madison.
I love that.
Which was super fun. I beat her by one shot. Just
narrow.
Just got to put that out there.
Yikes.
And then we went to a new restaurant that we had never been to before. And I'm going to be honest, I feel a little embarrassed about this. I don't remember what the name of it is. It's a local place in Madison.
You were there last night?
Yeah. Hey, the memory does what it wants, and a lot of times it wants to do nothing.
No judgment.
But we had some really great food there. I think at this restaurant, I got to try the greatest cheese curds I've ever eaten in my entire life.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
Which is saying a lot.
Cheese curd adventures.
A Wisconsin boy,
like,
that's high praise.
If you spent any time in Wisconsin, or if you live there, you know that we're known for our cheese and we're known for our beer. Those are pretty much the two things. But no, these cheese curds, they just melted in your mouth as you were eating them. And of course, we're from Wisconsin, so we had to dip them in ranch.
There you go.
Hold on, I'm sorry. That's just...
I'll be okay.
I feel bad for you that you have not learned to appreciate ranch, but it's okay that you haven't. It's okay. But yeah, so it was a really great few hours of we stayed off of our phones the whole time too, so that we knew we were paying attention to each other. And yeah, it was really great to take those few hours just to spend some quality time with my wife and get to experience some new food.
Some bomb food.
Love that.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I like that. I think I'll let you go last.
Okay.
I'll go. Yeah, so for me, let's see, this would have been, I think it was Tuesday night. For a few years, I've been going to this campus ministry called Campus Collective here in Oshkosh, and one of my friends, Shay, was there. I think we'll probably have him on at some point. He's got some stories to tell. But I was like, Shay, I've got to show you this place in Oshkosh. There in downtown Oshkosh, there is this fire escape ladder that's like maybe like 7 feet off the ground. And so, like,
I think I can see where this is going.
I think you probably can. The night is winding down, and Shay and I kind of like share a look, and we're out of there. And
whoa, hold up.
Yeah, so we left. He's like, I don't know where this place is. He thought I'd never been there. I've been up this fire escape many times, but I wanted to show it to him. So we get there, park a little ways away as to not be too obvious, and we get to the fire escape. And Shay told me later, he was like, I really hope Asher doesn't climb this ladder. And to his surprise...
That's when he realized.
To his surprise, I just like jumped right up and like climbed the ladder onto this probably like second story roof. It's probably a good
Like
maybe
3 stories.
maybe more like 50 feet up. And it's, I felt safe on the ladder, but it's maybe not everyone would. So Shay like sees me make it all the way to the top.
Parkour from rooftop to rooftop.
Well,
Whipping out that Tom Cruise running across rooftop to rooftop.
Yeah. So Shay sees me get to the top, and he's like, "Well, I guess I have to go up now." So he did it too. He made it all the way up, and he was very scared, but immediately glad that he did. We hung out up there for a while, just looked out at the city. We thought about like yelling something to people on the ground, but we ended up opting not to do that. It's probably
nice.
Didn't
we have
too much
some
of a
restraint.
menace?
What's that?
You didn't want to be too much of a menace?
Yeah. Some light trespassing there, and then we went down the fire escape, and Shay was like, "Okay, where's the next place?" And so I knew about this other place. It's kind of between 2 buildings, but I wasn't even sure if I could get up there. And so we went to it, and I kind of like tried to get up there, and then I did. And it was the same thing. We're like, well, we're in too far now. So Shay got up there too, and yeah, it turned out it was just like kind of like storage basically, but it was open air, kind of like a mini courtyard behind these apartments. So yeah, that was my microdose, little urban exploration.
So mine this week was I have a kid in sports this season, and so there's a lot of like dropping off and picking up, and I had a series of those yesterday, and instead of just like going home and having no time in between things, I decided to take that time and go to a local nature preserve and just like have the time out in the wild. And I hadn't taken any time to be in a wild space in a while. It's something that's really, really healing and calming and literally grounding for me. So just being out there again was so good. And I do a lot of my artwork in wild spaces using natural materials. So sometimes if I have time to like go on a hike by myself, I'll kind of play these little mind games with myself and like pressure myself to make some art, or I'll feel guilty if I don't create something. And yesterday I was really pushing back against that and really challenging myself to be like, this can just be like, this is your time. Just like enjoy this and allow it to heal you and allow it. Yeah, really just allow it. And then like the second that I took that pressure off of myself, it was just so much more enjoyable. And then like later on, I actually did have an idea and actually did end up making a piece of art, but it was nice. Just, it felt so good that it wasn't coming from like this place of pressure or guilt. Yeah. It was just like, it really did feel like a little mini adventure.
Like natural.
Yeah.
How it just came about. There's this guy that makes these videos. He's not really, he like has a soap company, but he makes these videos about him just like going out into the woods, and the caption is always like, I'm trying to rewild myself after like 20 years of domestication.
Yes. And
so he'll like climb a tree or, stick his hand in a hole in the ground or something, which like maybe not super smart in some of the cases, but like he's trying to make his brain remember that nature isn't dangerous. Like that's not where it's not like we're meant to be inside and then have little doses of outside.
Right.
It's like that's outside is where we've
That's
always
who we are.
where we've always needed to be.
Yeah. One of my favorite
Definitely.
artists says we talk about people losing their connection to nature as if they're separate things.
Right.
We have to remember we are nature.
Yeah.
And I love that, and I'm super passionate about like encouraging people to rewild themselves, because I think that's where so much healing is for so many of us.
Well, yeah. Hannah, thanks again for coming on the podcast today. It's been great having you.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was a joy. Go follow her on Instagram, and look at some of her art is on there too. So
Yeah, you can
There you
definitely
go.
see the art that I've done in Wild Spaces on there.
shout out for that.
All right. Well, I think that's it for another episode.
Yeah, make sure to stay tuned for the next episode, and yeah, this is us signing off.
Thanks, gentlemen.
That's it. See you later, everyone.